Hello, welcome to Fiber Trek. Welcome to our neck of the woods here in northern Maine. I'm still enjoying all that the winter season has to offer, as usual, especially the eagle visitors who are looking for scavenged ice fishing fish. Not typical for them to land so close, and I felt really blessed to have this visit. On this edition, I am going to talk a little bit about some other projects I've been working on besides knitting, which include getting the quilting back out and also working on decoupaging with napkins in my collage work and sharing that finished journal with you, and some just ways that I've been using my art. There will be knitting, of course, and I look forward to sharing that all with you. This lantern quilt I've been working on for a while, and I did get it off to the long armor this fall. I was remiss in picking it up for a number of reasons, and finally it has come home to me and it needs to be bound. I used a bunch of different fabrics for this pattern, but the background is Edited Sitar's linen texture in the sapphire colorway. So all of the fabrics I found through different sellers, but I wanted to highlight farming and sheep because this is going to a friend. You may remember I was working on this at the cabin on the lake this summer, and I really enjoyed the process of this particular piece. It was large blocks and went together fairly easy. So, initiating this project took a lot. I had to find the fabric and get all the tools assembled. Once I had that done and the fabric pressed, I felt much better and I got into a better flow. So, cutting all of the bias or the binding strips and then putting them together. In the past, I've typically just sewn them straight edge to straight edge, but I wanted to practice some other skills. So I employed this Hera marker, which is really great at making precise lines and marks in the fabric versus chalking, which I find sometimes doesn't always it leaves room for error. And I wanted to kind of sew these together on an angle so that I could reduce bulk in the fold and square it up, and the Hera marker worked wonderfully for that. I would definitely recommend putting that in your toolkit if you're a hand stitcher. Even if you want to do some quilting, you can mark and it will hold the mark on the fabric. Now, binding or putting this sewing, pick the right verb, Sarah. Putting or sewing, oh my goodness, the binding onto the quilt, I find to be the kind of the most laborious piece for me. Manipulating that amount of fabric, even though this was a small quilt without an extension table, I don't know, things don't go as smoothly, even though I'm using a straight line. But then this leads to my favorite part, which is the hand stitching. I really love this particular piece of the whole project. It, A, is leading towards a finish, and B, there is a rhythmic meditative flow. And I do find hand stitching super satisfying. So this is on its way to being finished, and I will continue to slip stitch around the whole piece. I wanted to share with you a technique I've been incorporating into my collage art and work, and that is decoupaging with paper napkins. I really love this technique because it expands the imagery you can use and how you can use different motifs. So for example, here I am using mixed media paper and I'm making the cover for a journal, and I'm going to use the entire napkin instead of picking one piece off of it. So first you need to separate out the layers. Typically there are two. And like I said, you can use specific motifs off one particular piece. In this example, I'm using the whole piece. So I like to have a more organic looking edge, something looks a little bit more feathered. So I'm just using a watercolor brush to take off a line so it creates kind of a tear line along the tissue and allows you to obviously custom fit the piece that you want to use. So now that I have the right size for the paper I'm using, I am going to use Mod Podge. You can use any fluid matte medium. You could paint on with white glue, something that's going to dry clear. I've also been mindful to pick a background that's going to highlight the motif on the front. So because the background is white, I'm going to be using a cream or a light colored background so that you can still see the images. I did have a little challenge with the paper once it got the moisture on it curling up, but I was able to just kind of manipulate that tissue with one hand. One of the tricks that I picked up through some of the tutorials I've seen is using saran wrap, and that helps to create a surface where you can smooth out all of the air bubbles without tearing the tissue paper. I'm also just using my brush to brush down the edges, anything that might not have gotten enough glue on it. You can finish the whole piece and go over the top of it with glue, but I chose not to do that. And as I mentioned, you can see that napkins really open up a whole bunch of new imagery and motifs to work with. So it's really fun. I found a bunch of these on Etsy where you can buy 2 or 4 at a time, and because obviously they're folded, you get 4 quads of the motifs. I really love working with this particular artist. I find her grumpy owls really cheerful. They make me smile every time. She does work a lot with birds, but she has some other really neat images. All of them incorporate plants. Here are some examples of things that I found of hers. These images are copyrighted, so I'm not really able to sell these pieces. Some napkin companies don't copyright their image, so you can use them in sellable art or sellable journal work that you are interested in doing. But for the most part, I'm using these for gifts or personal use. But I really love her aesthetic. It's just kind of whimsical and fun. So I'm going to use the same process as I just highlighted for the all over piece. I am going to remove the proportions that I don't want. A lot of times once these go down, they almost look like a watercolor if you remove the straight perfect edges. So that's what I'm doing here. And using that paintbrush motif or paintbrush technique is really fun because again, you can just pull out one piece of an item. So for example, like this feather, I just pulled that out. And I also did a mushroom as well. So this particular paper was just resume paper in the parchment color, and it held the medium fairly well. Once that dries, it's all clear and the texture is smooth. It doesn't feel like it's going to rip. So I'm going to place that into the signature. I'm just going to use my Japanese screw punch. It's very easy to use when a hole punch won't reach, and line that up and get it ready to be included. This is the example of the finished journal, which includes the decoupage work that we did. Here's another example of using a napkin on some handmade papers I ordered off of Etsy. I've been pulling in different types of mediums like the pressed flowers and wax seals, and I will feature those on another podcast. A number of these papers I've done with coffee dyeing, and here's some jelly plate, journal card work, places to write. Obviously, there's been stamping, more jelly plate. Here's that example of the napkin. As I've mentioned before, I really love working with all these different papers and kind of different art techniques and mediums, and I'm looking forward to cataloging my next journal project with you. So what about the knitting? Well, this month has been kind of I wanted to use the word purging, but I've been reading all this medieval historical fiction, and like words like dropsy and the bloody flux and purging have all been coming up, and let's not do that one. Let's do I've been, our favorite word, right? I've been curating my projects, and some have not made the cut. Lackluster play in the yarns. So for example, I ripped out the Norland hat. I didn't really feel like that gray and dark charcoal were enough of a contrast that really highlighted the pattern. So that went to the axe. It's all very medieval. And I also ripped out I think it's a rain shawl. There's like water waiting for rain, but I think it's the rain shawl. And I was knitting that in the Cashmere People yarns that you can get that through Port Fiber. So I ripped that out. It's not that I didn't think the color blocking was pretty. I liked the way it was working out, but I just didn't think it was something I would wear that frequently. So I ripped that out as much as I could. And I cast on the Trondheim cowl by Sophia Kamaborn, which is just a small kind of star-like pattern. And I wear cowls a lot, more than I do shawls. And I have one, which is the Rivington cowl by Kristen Kapoor, which I love, and I've knit it out of Coopworth. And so I thought I should just knit myself another cowl. And so I've cast on for that, and I'm just following the really basic chart, which is intuitive and easy to memorize. So that's on the go with the Cashmere People yarns. So that was one piece that off it went. I haven't really decided if I'm gonna knit the Norland hat again. I have some yarns that I'm considering for it, but right now that's kind of on hold and not really on my radar. So speaking of hats, I did cast on another Heart of the Forest hat, which is another pattern by Sophia Kamaborn. I knit the first version in a green and white, and it ended up fitting my niece perfectly, so my gauge was off, and it was actually probably more off in the row than in the circumference. So I've cast on, I went up 2 needle sizes, and I've cast on in this Old Salt yarn, which is the Hull colorway. I think this is a merino alpaca silk blend that she does, and this is Hull. And then the main color is going to be in this Hebridean from Croft 29, and another Old Salt. This is the Sedge colorway in her La Touche base, which is a BFL. So something a little bit more somber and earthy, but I was super inspired by this Sedge colorway and this brown. And I'm thinking I have another skein of this, and I'm sure I'll have some left over. And I've got some brown Hillesvåg in their Tinda colorway, Tinda weight, which is the worsted, DK worsted. I think they consider it kind of a heavier weight. And I'm thinking this will make a really beautiful yoke. So I have aspirations to covet as much as I can of this skein, and then use the other skein as well. So in a sweater. So I've been really into the hats, but I think I'm enjoying having some opportunity to play with color and have projects come off the needles, and I find them easy to travel with. Speaking of things coming out the needles, obviously I have on my Bresse by Marie Wallen. I've almost finished all the weaving and all the ends. I didn't do a very good job on the back, but I'm hoping my long hair will cover all the imperfections. And so, yeah, so I haven't had a chance really to wear it into the world yet. Sometimes I think I get too hot at work to wear this. It's not something I can like put under, like, put a shirt under. Ooh, I just saw a bunch of feathers go by, which made me slightly I think a squirrel may have attacked a blue jay. They're getting very territorial about the seed out here. So yeah, so I just not sure this is, as the work that I do as a speech pathologist, I get very hot. I'm down on the floor, kids are running, and I'm helping to support their navigation of the school in a meaningful way. And so I'm just not sure this is a practical piece for me to wear. So maybe a nice dinner out would be nice to go out to dinner. But all the same, yeah, so there it is. And yeah, I'm happy with this new piece. So speaking of sweaters on small needles and thin yarn, I have the fox sweater here. This is from Koftaboken, and I'm knitting this in Hillesvåg in the Solia base, in the rust colorway, and the white is Vilja, which is the white lamb's wool. So I picked this back up and am diligently knitting around and around and around down the body. So that is on the go and getting lots of attention. Looking forward to having that finished. I really would like to cast on another sweater, but I am staving myself off with the hats. And last but not least, I've been working on a sweater in my hand spun. I cast this on in 2020. This was a free pattern. This is the Cardin pattern, and it is a cable chunky weight, and Jennifer Woodhouse of Woodhouse Designs offered this for free for a while, and I think now it is a paid for pattern on Ravelry. And I'm knitting this out of a 3-ply handspun of my own from a Flat Island fleece from, I don't know, years ago. And yeah, so I hope I have enough of this yarn. If not, I have more of the fleece, so I can certainly spin more, but I would really like to just eke this out and be done, and not have to kind of futz away with dealing with the weight and all of that goes into creating a matching yarn. So anyway, the Cardin by Jennifer Woodhouse, and yeah, nice big chunky cable. I love the way her necklines work. She often just has a cast on and then it goes right into the cables, and it's I find it to be very feminine and not sporty. Sometimes like a crew neck looks a little bit too sporty for me, or a ribbing. So I like, as you can tell, I like just a basic simple neckline. So that is on the go. So 2 sweaters and the cowl and the hat for me for my knitting. And I've been getting a lot of that work done. Although, like I said, I've been quite involved in doing some reading of old favorites by Anya Seton, and also engaging in her book that I hadn't read, which is Catherine by Anya Seton. And and I have those as books, not as audibles. So blah, 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 blah. So that's really it for what's been happening in the yarn world. I have been contemplating some of my favorite yarns, and I'm thinking I might do a segment at the end of the month on kind of some of my favorite sweater knitting yarns that I felt like have great durability and have held up, and showcasing a couple of the sweaters that I match with them. So stay tuned for that. And as always, I hope you've enjoyed all the content here. And if you're a patron, thank you so much for investing in this project. And I look forward to seeing you next time. So be well, be in good spirits. Take care. Bye. As always, thank you for tuning in. I so appreciate the investment of time and support and insight you invest in this project. A special thank you for those that contribute financially through Patreon. If there are more in-depth tutorials or discussions you'd like me to have around the craft, art, or fiber work that I do, please feel free to leave that in the comments below. Take care.